Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking out a variation on Ambush SwordCraft. Okay, this is not a straight up super overpowered SwordCraft, and with Elena in the meta it can be a hard one to execute, but it is now reasonably cheap to run this variation. It does have some fun cards in it like Veteran Vagabond Frog and the new Meet 11 Sisters, and of course the new Albert for extra storm damage, otherwise running a very similar engine for the rest of the deck, and it makes sense. You're looking for those kind of finishes with Dual Blade Flurry or just going for full-on damage. Vagabond does a great job of that since you can easily combo together quite nicely, especially if you can get this out on 4 Evo and go straight into 5, where you can start dealing double damage and start buffing it and things like that. So we're going to get right into this and check it out. So the couple of games I have for you guys today are against Shadow. I really struggled against most other crafts with this deck. I think, of course, there are much better variations of Sword right now with things like full mid-range, but they are quite legendary heavy, and I wanted to stick to kind of the cheap theme since the video that I did last time on the cheap ambush sword actually did fairly well, and I'm hoping that this one can do pretty well as well. It's just a matter of the meta. I think once people learn the counters to things a bit better and work them out, it should be fine, but countering Elena is very hard. Even though we've got that new removal to remove its amulet, you still have to deal with everything else, and that's not a fun time. So Ferry Spirit Maiden, actually not an issue. So Leod is actually a very solid play. I do have to get rid of that 3/3 unfortunately. It's not a card you want to leave up for too long, so using Craving Splendor is actually not a bad way to remove it. Even though I would much prefer to use Craving Splendors as a buff instead of a negative, but at least it does have that nice little bit of versatility when being played so that we can do both. So Crafty Reaper, not really an issue either, but we do want to wipe as much of this as we can. We can actually take this out with Ivory Sword and then go for the Kunoichi as well, which is a fairly play, or we can just go for the Reckoning and just leave up, potentially, and not actually worry about the Ferry Maiden. That does actually seem okay, since we can use the Ivory Sword to remove a bigger board now, which I think definitely gives us some better value. And we can actually go for a 7 damage removal now, so that's actually pretty good. Although here, I probably should have held off attacking. I went for it because I really needed to do something before they started going crazy with cards. Since, of course, they have already got me down to 11, and that's not exactly the highest spot to be in. So I think I made at least a semi-right choice with this. And it did force them to have to use pretty much everything to remove it. So turn 6, Vagabond Frog, hitting the board. Good old Veteran. He is actually great on 6, he gets a nice little buff, and being able to throw him straight to the Evo and trade, and then defend himself again works out wonders for our board. So Eternal Bride, that's not a fun card to have to deal with, since of course it does have Clash. Craving Splendor though is the absolute perfect counter. We can actually use that very easily and remove. Now we can just kind of casually go face. Another Crafty Reaper, the Odin, not really a problem. I don't really have an option. I was trying to come up with a way I could go for lethal. Unfortunately, we were going to be short by 1 if I had went for, I think, the Albert and the Quick Blade to play. Even with Albert's buff, or maybe we would have had exact lethal with Albert's buff. What would it have been? Albert's buff potentially gives it +1, making it 6. 6, 4, 10, 14. Oh, I think we would have actually had lethal if we had went that way, but we ended up closing the game anyway. It was not something I accounted for, was his extra buffing, so that's life, unfortunately. So coming up next, we have got, of course, the Aisha. That's going to be fun to go up against. I'm a little disappointed that they made those two cards the way they did for the alt art and the original art. Would have been better if we at least got a better alt art that was so different that it wasn't going to be recognizable, but that's life, unfortunately. Well, not unrecognizable, but so different that it's easy to distinguish. So Quick Blade on turn 1, a good play, solid, like getting that down. Gives me that little bit of damage early, which is what we always want. Fortunately, I really don't have anything else to play but another Quick Blade on 2, so looks like we're going for damage. I did also prioritize getting the 11 system, which of course in this deck I like going for Mino because she does give me the Albert guaranteed draw. That is what I use that for the most. So Tanya, Shadow Enforcer, getting her down, great with the forged weaponry. You should be able to do some serious damage. Although I probably do want to push some damage this turn, even if it did uncover it. I mean, the odds are we'll probably lose it, but I think it's a worthwhile venture at this point. So 11, why not? Don't really have much else to play, and we're going to lose a card next turn anyway, so I may as well take something for it. Phantasmal Core, so they're going for a lot of shadows now. Most likely PTP, if I had to guess. With nice Hades. We're going to set up our forged weaponry this time. Warring Thunder, not an issue. It is a free Evo though, so that's actually a pretty nice setup on our opponent's end. So we can't win with this, but we can win with that. Dual Blade Fury plus an Evo, giving us 14 damage for lethal. Does give us that surprise sometimes and works out quite nicely.
Sure, you can have this one.
So while I do enjoy this deck, it definitely does struggle against most of what would be considered the top end of the meta right now. Of course, things are still changing a bit, but the top end is definitely consisting a lot of the Forest, Blood, and Haven variants, which is floating around quite a bit. So unfortunately, they're some of the ones it struggles against the most. It does tend to do well against Shadow. It does do well against other sword matches, and it can do quite well against the matches that it's negative to, but it will struggle a bit if they get a good hand. You really need to have the ideal ambush set up in the early game and get a nice Dual Blade by 5 or 6. Otherwise, you'll just get crushed pretty early on. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe. You'll find deck list in the description below. Until next time, guys, see ya.